Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Rees. My main role in life is being Freddie's dad. Fred's 16 and has Down syndrome and various other sort of labels. I've been a member of the DSA for a long time. We run Ups and Downs in Northamptonshire, which is a support group for families affected by Down syndrome. And I used to be a teacher and a head teacher, and I now work for a training organisation for teachers and school leaders. It's really nice to be here.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Deborah?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Deborah, and like Tom, my main role is being mum to Madalena, who's just turned 18, and also I before Madalena arrived in my life, I used to work in politics, and I work with lots of MPs, and I advise them on election law. And so, yeah, I'm here because I very recently got the opportunity to meet up with Will Quince, who is overseeing the SEND review. And I'm going to speak about my findings later. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Tania?
Hi, I'm Tania Tirraoro. I'm Special Needs Jungle. Excuse me, there's a bit of going on. I've got my grandson here. His dad's just arrived. So, yep, I'm happy to talk about anything at all to do with SEND, especially the SEND review.
Brilliant. And I will start very quickly with a very quick overview of the SEND review. And I'm sure many of you, it's been out for a while now, will be quite familiar with it. Let me just say, as we go along, I think I'm the only one doing a presentation, but we'll be shoving some links into the chat that you can look at from stuff that Tom and Deborah and Tania have been doing, and colleagues of theirs have been doing. Thoughts and comments, please put in the chat. We will try and make sure we have time at the end, but if you have general thoughts and comments, we'll be recording the chat. So please just put it in there so we can take it away, because we've still got a month to go before the consultation finishes. Usual thing, keep your mic, we'll hopefully have questions later, but if you can keep your microphones off while people are presenting, and then once we get to the question bit, sort of do the old hands up thing, or if that doesn't work, just kind of wave frantically, because we won't have a presentation then, so we should be able to see everyone. I think that's it. And then we've got a survey at the end, which will also give us some information in terms of what people's priorities are. So I'll put that in the chat further down the line and take like 2 minutes to fill it in. So that would be great if you can do that. Right, let me get on with this. So I'm just going to give an extremely quick overview of what the SEND review is. SEND review, so it was launched 29th of March, although it was 2 years in the making, various delays because of COVID and this, that, and the other. Finally launched and very much delayed on the 29th of March. It's a green paper, so it's a consultation document which aims to give feedback on potential policy or proposals. So, and I suspect Tania might raise some of this with her recent conversations with Will Quince. There's very much issues around some of the concrete nature of some of this stuff, and it's very much about what we're consulting. So it's intention. There are elements of it which are intentionally or otherwise somewhat vague at this point. The broad aim was about acknowledging that it was an inconsistent, process-heavy, and increasingly adversarial system, the system that wasn't working. And the consultation itself is seeking the views on not just changes to the SEN and disability system, but alternative provision, which has got its own chapter as well. And the consultation ends on the 22nd of July. So we've got a bit of time to get something in, and we'll be also really encouraging those of you who are coming as individual parents or part of local groups like Tom's one. If you want to put something in that way, the more the better. Do feel free to join in with some of the stuff we'll be putting together from the Down Syndrome Association, but like with the Down Syndrome Act consultation and any other kind of consultation we're involved in, we'd always be encouraging people to put in, if you can have something slightly different with your own particular perspective, we would be encouraging that as well. So in a nutshell, the three sort of key aims that were identified in the review was about poor outcomes, issues around navigating the SEND system, not a positive experience, fair enough to say that, I think. And then this last one about value for money. And I think this is one, and again, colleagues on the panel might chip in on this later. There's more and more questions being raised about what is meant, I think, by value for money, and whether actually elements of the SEND review is essentially a cost-cutting exercise. But anyway, that's how it was presented. The content, so yeah, here it is, SEND review. It's about 100 pages. It's not, sorry, it's slightly blurred. It's not huge, but fairly hefty. And I will just quickly whiz through. Oh, here's one of mine, right on cue. Disturb me. So 6 chapters. The first chapter is the case for change, and I think it gives actually a fairly, quite damning in bits, but a fairly blunt overview of what's not gone right. Chapter 2 is about a single SEND alternative provision system, and in here there's a whole load of stuff suggested, some national standards, updating the code of practice, which is a very big, essentially the statutory guidance that comes with SEND, so updating that, establishing local SEND partnerships, local inclusion plans. We don't know exactly what that would involve, but you know, it's another layer of bureaucracy, another layer of it. Is there accountability in there? A standardized and digitized EHCP process, which people were asking for when the Children and Families Act was first launched in 2014. Supporting parents and carers about expressing a preference for placements by giving a tailored list of settings. This is a big one as well, of questions about parental choice. Now it's being presented as you get more choice or a better choice by having a finite list, and there's some questions about that. And streamlining the redress process. Again, these are how it's phrased in the review, but some of that is about compulsory mediation. And again, there's a lot of opinions out there about how mediation has been a success, or what would involve scaling up mediation so that everyone who was potentially going to the tribunal would be going through it as a compulsory thing. Chapter 3, excellent provision from early years to adulthood. So there's a whole load of stuff in here on, this is where it starts identifying, and we'll talk a bit later about links to the other stuff that's happening at the moment. So links to the schools bills, looking at multi-academy trusts and the expectation of where the school system is going. There's some detail in here about teacher training, and particularly some information about a potentially new SENCO qualification. Chapter 4 is about the statutory framework for alternative provision, which, I mean, this wasn't there at the very beginning of the SEND review. It's come in, but some potentially welcome stuff about a performance framework for alternative provision, stuff about registration and provision which is not registered, timelines, processes for alternative provision, which I think there's a lot of questions there which people would welcome because of some of the somewhat sometimes vague nature of AP. Right, you're gonna, okay, you stay over there. Chapter 5, probably another area of a bit problematic about accountabilities. So this is where they're proposing things like a new regions group, national framework of banding, a whole load of stuff in there about how funding of special needs is reviewed, which is a huge headache and a really complicated part of this system. Sorry, my daughter's emptying a load of bags, which you may hear. And some welcome stuff about probably one of the undisputed successes of the Children and Families Act, update to the Ofsted and CQC inspection framework, which, you know, I think people would definitely be quite keen on. But I think in terms of accountabilities, well, I think I'll talk about that in a sec. And then chapter 6, delivering change, and that's a very short chapter, which again links in with some of the other stuff that's happening right now. Well, it talks about the white paper, but it's now the schools bill, the independent review of children's social care, and a few other sort of national bits and pieces. So acknowledging this system, the SEND review is not existing in a world of its own. So very quickly, we could generally welcome, I mean, the EHC plan template is an easy win. some stuff around the focus on co-production, the broad intentions of inclusion, and the proposals of local inclusion plans are all good in principle, but I think what applies to the whole document is about the detail of the ambitions, the detail of the proposals really isn't there in a lot of areas. Certainly talking about accountability, and again, Tania might have something to say on this. You know, when we were involved in this for the last 2 years, when stuff went out to parents and groups, accountability was so often near or at the top of the list in terms of people's concerns. Genuine accountability for the law and guidance to be followed. And you know, a lot of people would say that the review doesn't have the detail in there about how that's going to change. Not enough focus on specialist local services. That's very relevant for our world of our children and young people with Down syndrome, where that's particularly relevant. Concerns about diminishing parental rights, mentioned already, naming a school, and the issue about compulsory mediation and going to tribunal. And then that although it acknowledges the join up with the other laws and reviews, there is massive questions about actually that jigsaw puzzle, how these are all going to, the timings for all these. And we've got our own sort of version of this as well to add in terms of the Down Syndrome Act guidance, which is going to presumably have a section on education. How's that going to dovetail alongside the timeline for the SEND review and any changes the SEND review are doing, whether it's changes in guidance, changes in legislation, that will have to be reflected in whatever guidance we have that comes out of the Down Syndrome Act. And then that big issue, the cost of special needs and disability. And actually there is more and more concern about this as people are really getting their teeth more and more into the SEND review, and you know, things like the Education Select Committee, we're looking at it recently. So yeah, so plenty of that. That's a very quick overview. And yeah, here's the landscape. So stuff that's happened already: Health and Care Act, Down Syndrome Act, obviously this stuff happening as a consequence of those. SEND review, the schools bill, independent review of children's social care, the social care review just launched their final review, but there's still repercussions coming out of that. And then there's things coming up as well. So there's a whole world of things happening nationally, which have to connect with each other in some shape or form. So very quickly, next steps, we're going to respond to the consultation. We want to speak more to our members, our affiliated groups, and we encourage you to be part of ours or to do your own as well, or do your own, one with your group too. We work very closely with two very big networks, the Disabled Children's Partnership, and Deborah's going to speak about that because she met the minister through her work with the DCP, and the Special Educational Consortium, and these are made up of lots of national charities. Unions are involved, so it's a really good network of professionals, parent groups as well, going through all this stuff, and we're linking with them. But there's the email. If you've got any other thoughts, like I said, do put stuff into the chat. And sorry, I can't see the chat in case anything's come up, but do put things in there. And there's a page on our website which has got some of our updates so far. We did a briefing last week. There was some stuff that came out when the SEND review was launched, and we'll continue to add to this page. Right. End slideshow, stop share. Okay, so that's me done. And I think I'm slightly over, apologies. So straight over to Tania, just for some, for those of you who are aware of Special Needs Jungle, which I would expect most of you, Special Needs Jungle have been involved from day one with the SEND review and continue to be doing a huge amount of stuff on this. So we've invited Tania to give sort of sense of where things are at, where the concerns are, and you know, what sort of direction of travel organizations are going in and parent groups are going in. Tania, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Chris. Can I just check before I start how long you want me to bang on for?
10 minutes, please.
Okay, so I don't have a presentation with slides on because we've been doing, as you may have seen, a lot of podcasts and webinars, and I'm only human. But what I'm going to do is really talk through the things that we talked about yesterday on the webinar and our perspectives on that as well. So so far we've done a podcast with Will Quince, and we've also done a webinar, 2 webinars with Mr. Quince, one before the SEND review was published and the one that we did yesterday. Now he's a very charming chap and he talks good game. but you won't really get much of a sense of what's going on, because if you look at the SEND review green paper, as Chris has said, there isn't a lot of detail. Now, they say that they've done this deliberately, because basically they've come up with these headlines, but with no detail behind it. And I'm not even sure how much thinking there has gone into it at all. They do say, yesterday, Mr. Quint said that they have done an equalities impact their children's rights study, neither of which have been published. So we've asked for that because we would very much like to know how these proposals do not, in fact, adversely affect either of those two. There was the annual review consultation that came out just the other day, which is about timescales for annual reviews, because basically local authorities can't manage to get annual reviews done within the time limits that exist. So the Department for Education have said, well, let's double the time to give them, which basically doubles the time it would take you to get a draft plan, and that also lengthens the time that it may take you to get the right support for your child. Now, that one did have an equalities impact study with it. We think that this is because they think it supports their case, and they were happy to publish that. So why haven't they published the other one? Do you know, the questions that are with this consultation, they are very complex questions. They don't address every issue. And I think even professionals would have difficulty answering them. So we've been badgering them for a long time to get an email address, which we have finally been given. I don't have that to put up right now, but I'm sure Chris will be able to stick that up in the chat. That's an email address you'll be able to attach maybe Word documents or PDFs, or if your child wants to do a little video or a little audio, you should be able to attach that. Try not to attach links because they probably won't remember them. They won't click through to them. So this means you don't need to answer every single one of those questions to get your point across. So you just maybe use their headings, but also say what it is you really think about those proposals, or what you think needs to be done. The main point is that you do answer this consultation. Many of you may think that the Down Syndrome Act is sufficient. It is not. It does not cover anything to do with education or children's rights. So don't think that you must respond to this consultation. We have developed a series of questions with single answer forms on our website under Send Review. And what we've done under each one of those is listed what we call ponder points. So we've taken each of the questions in each of the chapters and we've cut them down into the things you really need to think about to be able to answer this. So please have a look at that. And if you can't face answering it any other way, just answer one or two of those that you think probably say the most to you. One of the concerns that things that we are quite a lot concerned about, very concerned about, is in the focus in the schools bill, which is much further along, and you need to read this along with the Send Green paper. There is a big focus on behaviour. Now, as you will know, as I know, many children who are disabled, who have SEND, their behaviour is impacted by their condition. As it stands, the proposals that are in the schools bill will mean that many of our children end up being excluded, being isolated, in seclusion rooms, and having no place to go. So this is something that you need to be really to think about what these proposals would mean, for example, for your child. Mr. Quint says he really doesn't want that to happen. And he's pushing the schools minister to try to ensure that there are some caveats within this, but I have no faith that that will happen. So this is one of the points that you need to answer about specifically. We also asked about how to make accessible schools. Mr. Quince thinks that there is going to be a lot of money to put into renewing school buildings, which is true, but it doesn't mean that they will be made into accessible buildings. Many schools are just crumbling to the ground, so the money will probably be used to shore up that, not necessarily make those schools accessible. If your child perhaps needs a wheelchair or needs a changing places cubicle or some other accessible things to make it possible for your child to attend. Now, a lot of us think that the Children and Families Act is fine. The problem with the Children's Families Act is that local authorities can't seem to abide by it. So in the same way that they are looking to change the annual review timescales to make local authorities, make it easier for them to comply with them, they are, it seems, trying to make the Children and Families Act easier for local authorities. But this would obviously be at the cost of parents. There's a comment I made yesterday that you wouldn't change a criminal law because a burglar can't stop burgling, but this is what it seems to be happening with the Green Paper. Accountability. Please, when you answer the consultation, make sure there isn't really any questions about accountability, but make sure you include that. If you want to do it by the government site, question 22 is where you put that. We think there should be a bigger role and sharper teeth for the Ombudsman, as they've asked for. Nothing about that in the Green Paper. So really, you take, if you don't think that a national SEND delivery board is a good idea, if you don't necessarily think inclusion plans do anything more than the local offer will do, if you don't think that mandatory mediation, which is another of the proposals, is a good thing, you need to push back, because not only will the DFE be looking at the responses, the quality of the responses, what's in them, they'll be looking at how many people have answered each question, and from that they will be gauging what people care about. So if you don't answer anything about mandatory mediation, they will think that maybe you're in favor of it. So this is why it's really important to try to answer the main points that they're being made. Now, nobody thinks mandatory mediation is a good idea apart from the Department for Education. And we don't know why, because there is no evidence to support this. They've had a lot of negative feedback. Mr. Quint said yesterday, well, it just seems that local authorities don't like it, parents don't like it, so there must be something in there that I really need to look at. Yes, you need to look at chucking it out into the sea. He says he's not wedded to it, so if you push for this, we can get rid of it. It was chucked out of the 2014 reforms for the very same reasons it's going to be chucked out of these ones, because it's completely unworkable, because there is already an issue, a part of compulsion for mandatory mediation, and that's as much as there needs to be. For training, Chris has mentioned training. There is very little in there about training. There is nothing in the ITT core framework that says every teacher should be a teacher of SEND. It's in the code of practice, but there is not, teachers are just not trained for that. So you need to push back to say that if you're going to have a strong SEN support, you need to have teachers who understand SEND so that they can spot. I mean, obviously, if your child has Down syndrome, it's not like it's going to be a surprise to a teacher, but they may not know how to support them, because every child is different. They may have had one child with Down syndrome a couple of years ago, so they think they know it all. I mean, I don't think that's uncommon. So they need to understand the nuances. And you can only get that through CPD, ongoing CPD, through training. They have come up with early years Senkos, a good idea, but there's only 5,000 of them to go around the entire country. And they've come up with an idea for NPQs, professional qualifications, instead of what is a postgraduate level Senko training. So while NPQs may be a good idea, many people want to keep both so that they can have a more academic route. How am I doing on time, Chris?
Wrapping up.
Okay, so I mean, really what you need to be doing is looking at our website, how we've broken it down for you, thinking about the things that are important to you, and answering those questions, because, as I said, the DfE will look at what hasn't been answered and think that that means their proposals are fine. So it's a lot to ask. There is so much going on. There is also the Ofsted consultation. The good news is that those proposals are quite good. So if there is something that is going to be the straw that breaks camel's back, leave that one, because we'll be responding to it anyway, and I'm sure the DSA will be responding to it too. But really, please do your very best to try to answer as much of the SEND review consultation as you can.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tania. And I put some links in. I put the email, the SEND review email, and I put that link, as Tania said, there's a huge amount of almost daily stuff coming out of Special Needs Jungle about the SEND review. So I put the overall SEND review
It's
link.
exhausting.
Where you can scroll down and find stuff about post 16 and all kinds of things. And as we know, Hayley Newman, who's a very well-known blogger in our world of Down syndrome, she is part of Special Needs Jungle as well. So great. Right, straight over to Tom.
And Nancy Gedge.
Oh yes, and Nancy, yeah. Straight over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Tania. Right, 10 minutes, here goes. So back to the sort of beginning for me. So I think the first thing to say about the SEND Green Paper is I think it's an important and overdue opportunity that we've got to answer this question of how the education system works for most vulnerable children in schools. And so I think it's welcome that we've actually got space to have this like on the national agenda at the moment. And overall, I think it is a step in the right direction, particularly in terms of the problems that it identifies within the Green Paper. I think colleague who just spoke is right to say there's sort of less detail on some of the proposals. But I think in terms of its honesty about some of the problems in the system, I actually think the Green Paper has done a good job of that. And I also think it's worth saying that it's hard for a government that's been in office for 12 years to actually be so honest about how bad the SEND system is in lots of places at the moment. So I think it's welcome that we've got a fairly honest appraisal of what is a system that's really not working in a lot of places for young people, for families, for the school system, and in terms of value for money. So that's worth saying. So I think some of the things it captures really well is the frustration, the inefficiencies, the delays, disagreements that lots of you as parents and me as a parent, and also someone who's been a head teacher of a school and has run a special education setting, like really recognise from both sides. And often what happens is in the current system is you get to this situation where the system drives almost an adversarial approach, where you've got parents and schools sort of fighting against each other. And really, you know, professionals and parents want to get to the same place. They really want to get the right support in, but you find yourselves in these battles to be able to try and get the support that you think that children need. So I think it's good that the paper calls this out. We'll definitely not change anything unless we're honest about some of the problems that we've got in the first place. I also think it's important that we've got this acknowledgement of a lack of clarity about who is exactly responsible for what in the system. There are still lots of agencies and different professional bodies that are where it's unclear, and we've got an acknowledgement that the regional difference is a problem. So we shouldn't be in a situation where, depending on your postcode, you've got sort of qualitatively different provision for SEND than you have in another. And I think that is a move towards a national set of standards makes lots of sense. Move towards a common system, for me, makes a lot of sense. So overall, I would agree that the Green Paper does a good job of framing the problems which exist in the system at the moment. Firstly, that outcomes for children with SEND are poor, they're not good enough. Secondly, that navigating the SEND system is not a positive experience for children, young people and families. And thirdly, despite now unprecedented investment in the system, it's not delivering value for money. So Chris has really kindly shared a blog here, which I wrote with a colleague. He's a school leader in a school, and he's also a parent of a daughter with Williams syndrome. And we wrote this blog because we think that currently although the Green Paper does a good job of identifying those 3 problems, it fails to recognise a 4th, more fundamental problem around special educational needs and disability, which is that it's still framed within a deficit narrative. So the sort of current SEND system conceptualises learning disability and special educational needs as something that's gone wrong. And we think we can do better than that. And we think if we're going to take this opportunity to think again as a society about how we provide, how we support young people with disability and adults with disability in society, we can be more ambitious, we can be more dignified in the way that we think about special educational needs. And that's a thing that I'll sort of talk a little bit about when I talk about some of the things that we might do as a result. So sort of deficit framing of SEND as a disability. So I've got sort of 5 or 6 things I think I'm thinking about that aren't laid out specifically in the Green Paper as it stands at the moment, but I'm really hopeful, and certainly in the response that I'll give, I'll be sort of pushing these things in, and in my view, they're things that we could all think about in how we respond. But I would also say, in terms of the the Green Paper itself, we're still quite a long way off from policy with the Green Paper in its current state. There's still a lot of challenges politically to get that into a white paper. We've got quite a short Parliament now, only a couple of years. There's going to be quite a big job to do to get it into policy. And then after that, as we know from the 2014 reforms, there's a huge job for delivery. Like, even if we get the best sort of policy as a result of this, there's a massive delivery challenge for us in the system, which will require health, education, the work that's going on in the white paper for the school system, and as we move into a system that's led primarily by school trusts. So I think there's a thing that even if everything was right in terms of the propositions that are being made, a thing I think we need to pay a lot of attention to is the delivery of this, and making sure that there's enough investment in making sure that what's sort of set out in policy is delivered on. So a few points of things that I think that are really important. The first is like this point about deficit. Disability is not a deficit, and we have to move away. We have to move on from associating additional needs with being somehow something that's gone wrong. It's the medicalised model of SEND that is so sort of prevalent in lots of the inclusion narrative. And I think it's one that we need to move on if we're going to be more inclusive, accepting and compassionate as a society. So I'm going to quote Barney Anglis, who wrote in the Research Ed Guide to SEND, who said that it often seems the only way for young people with SEND or their parents and carers to get help is to characterise themselves as impaired or somehow less. And I know for many of you on the call, and certainly this has been our experience of managing the EHCP process, DLA processes, that whole process drives you to tell your worst story, to paint your children or yourselves in the worst possible light. And so what we're doing through these processes is we're saying, in order to access more support and help in our society, you first have to prove that you've failed, and that all the support that's been put in around you has also failed. And I think, we've really got to think about how we can create more dignity in the system, about how we can make sure that we don't have families working through what is an incredibly traumatic, stressful process. And they don't have to do it once. We seem to have to do it again and again and again, depending on which professionals you meet, which schools you move to. So I think there is a real need, if we're going to move to have national standards in SEND, to be clear in those national standards about the duty of care that the SEND system has in order to have a much more positive and affirmative approach. The second thing is, I think we should have much higher expectations of outcome for children with SEND and people with Down syndrome. So I think often we get very fixated in the system about the type of provision that people are entitled to, the amount of the things that are written on the HCP, and they're for good reasons sometimes. I don't want to sort of suggest that we shouldn't push for entitlement to certain amount of support. But the entitlement support only matters if the outcomes are actually high enough. And in my view, often we see in the system that even when people have the entitlement themselves, they're not making they're not achieving the outcomes that they could do. And in my view, that is a thing that we should be achieving much more within the school system at the moment. My third point is about additional and different. So one of the sort of things within the SEND code and practice is the idea that you're entitled to something which is additional and different. And I think that language is problematic, and it means that we often think we have to do something completely different and as an alternative strategy, when in many cases that isn't the case. What children with SEND need is more specialist, more rigorous, more expert input on particular things. In some cases, we know that children with SEND, children with Down syndrome, they are human. They learn in the way that other humans learn. They need more expert, they need more focused input in their teaching, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily need to have additional and different, which can take sometimes us away from where there's more expert practice and into some of the areas which I think some of the sort of worst aspects of SEND provision, which isn't driven by evidence, which leads me on to my next point, is I think we need more evidence in the system. I think we should demand a higher bar and expectation for the amount of specialist evidence that schools and providers use and lean on in order to make recommendations that are on EHCPs. And in my sort of personal and professional experience, I think that lots of the things which are recommended on EHCPs, when you really push hard at that and you look at the evidence base that sits behind that, we are not yet expecting in the education sector and in the SEND sector the same level of rigor and the same level of evidence that we would expect in other sectors that are further on and have a stronger evidence base to build on. So I think we should demand more in terms of the evidence that we rely on. I'm going to be really quick, so I'm conscious of running out of time. So then sort of two more things. One is greater expertise. So we know that children with EHCP consistently spend less time with highly qualified adults, and that really isn't to sort of be disrespectful in any way to the expert and wonderful teaching assistant support staff that do a lot of great work. But I think it is a problem for us in the system that we don't have enough specialist expertise in certain areas. And we know with SEND as this broad category, it doesn't really mean anything in itself. You have to break down and look at the individual needs, the individual areas of expertise. It's the same for Down syndrome as well. There's not sort of, one specialist for all of Down syndrome. It relies on so many different areas of specialist expertise to really get the right provision and support for children and young people. And so we should have a greater focus on that. And then the final point I just want to make is about proximity. So we know the evidence tells us that proximity really matters. Adults who know somebody who has a learning disability are much more likely to hold the view that people with learning disability can make a positive contribution to society. So what that tells us is it's really important for children with learning disabilities to come into more contact with the wider population. That's an important thing for us to do if we're to then have a society where more people have higher expectations and a more positive and affirmative view. So whatever the sort of the mechanisms are that come through in policy that end up working their way into the system, but we must make sure, whether that's through integration, specialist provision, special units associated with just whatever, that we make sure we have higher and not lower levels of proximity and contact between children with learning disability and the wider school population.
Oh, then you can come on.
Chris, I think that's 11 minutes. I'm sorry if I've overrun. I had a lot to say.
Yeah, you like that.
Hello.
You like that, did you? Great. Deborah, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. First off, I wanted to say how much I love Special Needs Jungle. I've got so much amazing information from it. And yeah, so I just wanted to shout that out. And if you haven't visited it, please go and visit it, because it's got so much in there for everybody. So yeah, I love it. So yeah, I'm a parent, and before I became a parent to my daughter, Madalena, I used to work in politics. So I left politics and ended up being a parent to Madalena. And then I started navigating the SEND system, which, as you all know, is no easy journey. And I got the opportunity from DCP, which, if you don't know what that is, it's Disabled Children's Partnership. And that's also worth, you know, having a little look at, because it's got lots of really interesting information, and they do a lot of lobbying and campaigning. And I you know, used to get their emails, and then one day I got an email and I decided to email back and said, no, you're wrong, this is not right, it should be this way. And that then led me to conversations with the DCP, and they invited me to go and meet Will Quince to talk to him about the SEND review. So yeah, off I went and had the opportunity to meet Will. And I think the first thing that I said to him, which is really, really important, I said, why is it that as a SEND parent, it feels like we are running the gauntlet? You know, and I asked him if he knew what that actually meant, because that's what it's like. It's continuous, it's hard, it's exhausting, it's a battle. Certainly from my experience, it's been just a continuous battle, trying to get the right provision, trying to get my daughter's needs met. And I wanted to ask him, why is it so difficult? Why are we so exhausted from continually fighting to get our children's needs met? And you know, he did actually apologise. And if you see it, the interview was covered in the Sun, and he did apologise. And you know, to be fair to him, I guess he's doing the best that he can. And I think my point is that the people that are actually really kind of in charge of this, that are doing it, are the civil servants. And I also wanted to, you know, I also asked him, why does he have any parents on there? And because that really, as we all know, is where the experience is. We are the ones with the lived experience. We are the experts on our children. We know our children. We know what they need, and we kind of don't need to be told by somebody who doesn't really know our children what they think that our child needs. One of the important questions that I wanted to speak to him about was about the choices of school. And, you know, when I read the SEND review, this made me feel quite horrified, because it seemed to me that it was sold that they were kind of doing us a favour by choosing a selection of schools for us. But when I read it, it felt quite limiting and it felt disempowering. And I asked him, you know, as parents, we want to work together. We want co-production. We don't want to be told what to do. We don't want to be told which schools that you think our children should go to, because we know we can actually work that out ourselves. Now, he kind of thought that actually most people who've responded so far to the SEND review actually really welcomed that. And I disagreed with that, because certainly from my experience, had that been in legislation, then the school that I chose for my daughter, she wouldn't have been able to go to, because it was out of county, because I couldn't find the right school for her in the county that I live in. So so from my own personal experience, I don't think that really is helpful. And I'd be interested to hear your views, Tom, on this, because obviously, you know, from your professional role and your parental role, how you feel about this. But I feel it's restrictive, and it feels very disempowering for me. I mean, I think it's already been covered, but again, another concern was the mediation before tribunal. And I think one of the points was like, where are you going to get the money from to pay for these mediators? Who's going to train them? How long is this going to take to put another layer of bureaucracy in before parents get to tribunal? Because if they're not happy, if the LA has already decided that the school of their choice isn't available or they don't think it's suitable, then I don't really see how mediation is really going to change that. I think it's just going to slow up the system. And maybe that's me being cynical, but you know, I've had 18 years of navigating the system that has not been easy, you know, and I do advocate for lots of other parents that have children, not necessarily just with Down syndrome, but with SEND. And it's the same thing coming back. It's hard, it's challenging, and somehow it just needs to be easier and more, I guess the word is seamless, really, because it's feels hard at times. Let me see what else I want to add into the mix. I think it hasn't been touched on, but again, in the SEND Green Paper, there's a national system of banding and tariffs. And I think, again, when you're looking at that, yeah, all of our children have Down syndrome, but their needs and abilities can vary. You know, it's a continuum from children with Down. You know, there's such a variety. It's not necessarily that you can put all children in the same category or in the same box. The head of my daughter's primary school called me a disgrace to humanity because I challenged him. And, you know, I said, when is this going to stop? When is this going to stop that teachers think that they know more than the parent? Because I don't believe they do. And I think and I'm certainly not discounting, because there are some incredible teachers out there. There really are, that go above and beyond their role. But I think what really I want to see is more co-production, that we work together, not work against each other. Because in the end, surely the whole point is that we all want the same thing.
For more information on our upcoming sessions, click on the Training and Support page on our website.